Welcome to Growing in Grace, a weekly program featuring informal conversation to help with growth in understanding the gospel and to live in the freedom that comes through Jesus Christ. And now, here's the hosts of Growing in Grace, Mike Kapler and Joel Berizicki.
I'm Mike, along with Joel. Thanks for being with us once again for Growing in Grace. Joel, ready for another week? What is this, our 102nd program?
Number 102. Hey, it's another milestone. In somebody's eyes, I don't know. But yeah, I was excited when we passed 100. Mike, you've known this about me for a long time, but I'm kind of a shy person. I'm not a person who necessarily likes to talk. I'm not someone who likes to be in the spotlight. When Dave Lesniak approached me with this idea for me to get together with you in recording, this weekly program, I shied away from it like you'd never know. And even, Mike, you and I, we've both been in radio. And 12 years ago when I had that opportunity, I prayed and prayed and prayed, kind of, that God wasn't leading me in that direction, but He was. He was just doing it. And so it's just the power of the Lord at work, doing what He wants to do in and through us. It amazes me that you and me could have gone this far with this. Just knowing myself, just knowing how out of my comfort zone this is.
Well, it's different. You and I are not recording in the same place. You're at your house and I'm in mine. We broadcast not just on a radio station that's heard locally. It's something that can be heard around the world, so that's unique. Maybe not as unique as it was a couple of years ago, but to me it's still fascinating from a kid who grew up trying to talk into a soup can tied to a string. So it is fascinating to me to see how hopefully we can take advantage of technology to the fullest and effectively communicate the gospel to people where they can experience freedom in Jesus Christ in a way that people have never been able to before because maybe they've never really heard the gospel the way the Lord meant it to be presented in the freedom of Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. I think this is definitely, at least at this time in history, this is one of the ways that God is getting the message, His message. It's not our message. It's His gospel. It's His good news. It's His message of grace and peace that's getting out to the world. And you and me, Mike, and anyone else who's sharing the message, we're His vessels. He's declaring His message through people. And the method that He's using, at least with you and me, Mike, is in this format, is the Internet, is an MP3 file, and Internet radio. And God is always at work getting His message out. And I think that this way, like you're saying, is getting the message to places that it never would have gotten to otherwise. So it's a good thing.
It's a very good thing. And we thank you for listening. Maybe share with a friend. Drop them an email and tell them how they can listen. And we'd love to hear from you, too. Maybe at the end of the program, we'll make sure that you know how you can communicate with us and let us know you're out there listening. That would mean a lot to us. It's very encouraging. Joel, we'll talk about the patience of the Lord here in just a minute. But before we get to that, we were talking last week about some of our vacation experiences. And when we were leaving the Las Vegas airport, when our family went out to Las Vegas for a few days, and for those who missed last week's program, no, we didn't gamble, so just take it easy. But we had an interesting experience. I've done some flying. I'm not a frequent flyer by any means. But when we got to the Las Vegas airport, we returned our rental car, and everything went ahead of schedule. So we got to the airport probably a little bit earlier than I thought. I would say by the time we got shuttled from our rental car over to the terminal, that we were at least 2.5 hours before our departure. And that's what they tell you to get there at in Las Vegas, get there 2.5 hours early, but that's always been way overrated. But we got there in plenty of time. Well, the line at the ticket counter was pretty long, but we got through that. And then we were trying to decide, should we eat or should we go through security? Well, let's see what we run into for restaurants. We didn't run into anything, so we get to the security, and I have never seen a mass of humanity like what we saw at the security counter. And this was before any terror threat levels were raised. There was some action over in England a while back, but it was even right before that. And the line was so long, and it was taking forever, Joel. I could not believe this. They just need a new system there. They just do. And it was like a long line at Disney. You know, one of those that it doesn't look that long at first, but then you get up there and you wait in line and you find out that this thing wraps around and zigzags. I mean, it zigs and it zags forever. And that's what this did. But the sad part about it was, even before we got up there to find out how much it zigged and zagged, it looked really bad from a distance. And it was worse when you got closer. So we finally get through that. We barely had time to grab anything fast to eat before we could get on the plane. But while we were waiting in line, I began to experience some of my own impatience.
Oh, you mean you didn't use that time to just spend with the Lord and glorify Him and tell Him how great He is? And
you know, you're kind of kidding around with me, but as I sit here and think about it, I look back on it now and I say, what a perfect time that would have been if I wasn't conversing with somebody. What a perfect time that would have been to just spend some time in prayer, or thinking about some things in the Word. And I just stood there brooding. I don't know how long we were in that line, but I'm not one of these people that displays anger very often, and I didn't there. But inside, I'm just sitting there thinking, when is this thing going to get over with? And that probably makes the time go by even slower when you do that.
Yeah, I can relate on my daily job that I do as a courier for a hospital. And I'll give the quick version of this. You know, I drive anywhere from 120 to 150 miles a day. And what I do is I have a couple of towns that I go to regularly. And then after that, I call 3 or 4 different clinics to see if they need me to stop there for any reason. On the good days, from an inpatient point of view, on the good days, some of the far out clinics, the ones that are way out there, that are more miles to drive, they don't need me. And so I'm like, yes. And on the inside, it's great. And I can get done earlier, I get back earlier, and get home earlier. On the other days, and this, I've become more and more patient as time goes by, but I do have my days where, the Forest Clinic, we need you to stop, Joel. And I just, on the inside, I grumble about it. And I'm thinking, just like you're thinking, on those days, and it's kind of evolved into this now, but it didn't used to be like this, but those days can be some of the best days, even though I have to drive farther, and I don't like the idea that I have to drive more. A lot of those days turn into a time of prayer and fellowship with the Lord. But then I do have those days where it's just like I'm mumbling the whole way. I'm thinking, why do I have to go down here today? I wanted to get home. I got to, something I got to do. And it totally it wastes the time that I could have been spending with the Lord, thinking about the things of the Lord and like what you're talking about. So I can definitely relate, and that's, I think, normal for a lot of people. It's not a normal thing for us to be patient, I think.
Well, I think you're right. I struggle with it a little bit. Like I said, it's not a big outward thing where somebody's going to notice I'm impatient. In fact, a lot of people say how I always seem to stay the same when I'm under pressure or not. I always just sort of seem sort of steady. But inside, a lot of times, I do get impatient. I don't like waiting in line. Now, another trip we made just this past week, Joel, was to Chicago. We saw the Cubs play a baseball game.
That's too bad.
Did not see Barry Bonds. He sat out. Oh. But that's another story. I'll get into him some other day. But we went to one of our favorite places when we're in Chicago. It's called Gino's Pizza, Chicago deep dish. The crust is to die for, if I can use that phrase. We just love going there, right? It's been rated one of the top pizza places in the country. And it takes like 45 minutes to get these deep dish pizzas to your table, Joel, after you order it. But it's usually worth the wait. Well, there were 5 of us sitting at our table, and the service was kind of so-so. I mean, the guy was pretty nice, but he sort of acted like he wasn't sure if he wanted to be there. Maybe they were short-handed, I don't know. Finally, I'm thinking, man, 45 minutes seems like a long time to wait. And it turns out we had been waiting longer than that, and I think we'd figured out at that point that we'd been waiting about an hour. And finally he goes by and says, I'll get that right out to you. He comes by a little bit later and says, it's probably going to be 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to talk to the manager. You're probably going to get the whole thing for free. Well, and as it turns out, I think we did end up waiting about an hour and a half. He may have dropped the ball. A little side note here, be careful of waiters and waitresses who don't write down your order. They just look like they're memorizing it. But somewhere along the way, they've got to write it down, don't they?
You would think so.
I mean, how would the cook know to make it?
Exactly.
I think he forgot to write it down. Anyway, we didn't get the pizza right away. We did get it for free, like a $20 pizza, and they threw in some delicious cheesy sticks or something like that. And, sometimes good things will come when you're patient. I mean, to me, it was worth the extra half-hour wait or whatever it was to get a free pizza. Yeah, we saved a few bucks, and, when you're in Chicago, you're spending too much anyway. So I say all that to say that sometimes if you can, exhibit some patience, oftentimes that's going to be a good thing in the long run. Not to over-spiritualize the point, Joel, but I think the thing we want to try to get to here in our last couple of minutes is that it's not just about us being patient. It's about us beginning to understand just how patient God is with us.
We relate to one another often through our experience of impatience with each other. I mean, that's how humans a lot of times relate to each other, because we are impatient a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times. And unless we're letting the Spirit of the Lord lead us and guide us and direct us, and as we grow in grace, we understand His patience more, we become more patient. But it's sometimes hard for us to understand the God of patience, as Paul calls Him in Romans 15:5. He says, "May the God of patience and comfort grant you to be like-minded toward one another." And the patience of God, I mean, this is kind of where we're leading up to here. God, His patience is without end. Mike, you've shared about how your patience, kind of ran out. At least on the inside, it might not have showed on the outside. I've shared how I run out of patience, and sometimes we think that that's how God is. That as He's waiting for us to change, we think God's waiting for us to change, and He's just being patient. One of these days, He's going to blow His fuse. He's just going to have enough, and then that's going to be enough, and He's going to lose His patience. But 1 Corinthians 13, it tells us that agape love is patient, and the thing about God's patience is that there is no end to God's patience. He has perfect patience. And we're told about this all throughout the Bible. And God is not willing that anybody should perish, but because of His patience, He's wanting everyone to come to Him through repenting from unbelief and turning to Him. So, any final words, Mike?
Well, many of us have experienced impatience from another, Joel. Whether you're a small child learning a new thing, or a teenager learning how to drive, maybe even from your boss, you might have experienced impatience from a parent. Don't relate to God because of those experiences. Don't relate to Him in that way, because He is not impatient with you. He will stay with you all the way till the end with perfect patience.
Well, I'm Joel, along with Mike. This has been Growing in Grace. Feel free to check out more about us at graceroots.org. Drop us a line. Let us know how you're doing. And we'll be back again with you next time for more talk about growing in grace.
You've been listening to Growing in Grace with Mike Kapler and Joel Beruzacki, a weekly program featuring informal conversation to help with growth in understanding the gospel and to live in the freedom that comes through Jesus Christ.